Okay, everybody, this is Sheets, and Bobby is actually tending to some fire management in Santa Barbara today. I don't know what a person would want to do living in that area nowadays, but nonetheless, um, there's a 14-game slate tomorrow in the NBA, and the Thanksgiving Day football is coming on, obviously, on Thursday. And Bobby really wanted to do something for those big slates, so probably going to get something like that done tomorrow. And he said, I'm dealing with something with the house today. Would you mind just putting up something about the two-gamer? And I'm like, sure. I mean, whatever Bobby wants, he's the best. So as long as people get something out of this, I'm more than happy to do it. With that said, I think about this stuff. And when I used to do poker content for Poker X Factor, I really wanted to be different. I don't mean different, but I didn't want to just give the usual crap, okay? Like, these are the hands you should play. This is when you should go all in. So I really tried my best when I did that to, do things a little bit differently. I would talk about the math behind some of the plays. I would talk about some psychology behind some of the plays. I would talk about other stuff that not everybody was learning, and I would just try to be a little bit different. And when I'm starting to get into this DFS content, I really have to remember to think the same way. In the DFS community now, there's so many places you can go to get the plays. I mean, honestly, as someone who always looks for plays myself when I play DFS, it's important to get those plays, but I'm not going to be able to help you with that. In other words, I could just send you to all the different sites, tell you to, just grab an optimizer, run the optimizer, set it for maximum, whatever settings you want, and you'll come up with good plays. There's so much content out there and so many people giving the quote-unquote good plays that I'm really not going to be any great value added with respect to that. So when I talk to Bobby about doing these, I really have to remember what I'm trying to accomplish. I want to give you guys my take on DFS and how I think you should be looking at it, maybe in a different way than you might be used to. You talk about give a man to fish versus, teach the man to fish, that whole thing. I'm not going to be that high-handed to say, well, I'm not going to show you anything. I'm just going to show you how to learn. That's important as well. But I want to at least bring my experience, both from, poker, from stock portfolio management, and show you different ways that might apply to DFS to maybe get you thinking about things a little bit differently. So the first thing I wanted to talk about before we do this two-game slate is something called, I guess from the stock market, random walk theory. Basically, that being the idea that all the information that is presently available is already baked into the price of a stock or in any asset. Any information that you think you might have has already been priced into that stock such that there really is no edge at all. Now, again, that's just a theory and a concept that's been going around for hundreds and thousands of years. And I want you to keep that in mind with respect to DFS, because with so much content out there, it's going to be very difficult for you to obtain that great of an edge over anyone else, right? Because there's so many projection systems out there, so much content out there that you have to think about when you're making lineups, how are you getting an edge over everyone else? Because if you don't have any kind of an edge at all, then you're fighting the rake and then you're just going to lose, right? Now, yes, it's true that there is a decent percentage of people that just kind of just push buttons and don't go to any websites and don't look at any of the plays at all. And yes, you'll always have an edge over them. But what I'm going to try to get you guys to look at is ways to think about getting an edge over just blindly running optimizers. Now, again, you could run optimizers to get the good plays, which makes sense. But then again, how do you get those lower owned lineups? How do you get the higher leverage lineups? How do you separate between guys that both look kind of the same? Okay. So for tonight's two-game slate, I threw a lineup up here. Again, this is Clippers against Dallas and Washington against Denver. And this is either one of the optimals I ran or something close to it, just to give you a starting point of what quote-unquote good plays are. What I want to do is go through the games from the way I look at them and see if there's any upside to be had other than just blinding playing what the optimal is, okay? Especially if you're playing GPPs when you have to try to beat 1,500 billion people. First thing I will tell you, again, is there's news to be released, which is going to change everything. Like in this Clipper game, I have no idea whether Kawhi is playing or not, whether Paul George is playing or not, whether one's playing, whether both are playing. They're just not going to announce that yet. So, obviously the plays can change. But suffice it to say that if either of them are out, then the other guy would probably get a usage bump. And also, unfortunately, they would also get a popularity bump. So is the usage bump and the projection bump going to be worth the popularity bump? Well, that's what makes things fun, right? But, keep in mind that if, in fact, Kawhi is ruled out, then both Lou Williams and Paul George would get bumps. And if Paul George would be ruled out, then the other two would get bumps as well. The other game that's tonight is Washington at Denver. And we're going to look at both games, but we're going to look at it from the point of view of where is their upside. I don't think it's as important to make that kind of highly correlated lineup today. The only reason I mention is there's only a 2-game slate. There are only, 34 betting entrants, so to speak. And there are only a couple of plays you can make. And there's going to be so many people just stacking the crap out of one or not both of these games that you're really not going to be any different by making these big game stacks. You know what I mean? Like if it was a 14-game slate, you want to take a stand on 1 or 2 games to make game stacks that are going to be low owned. That's one thing. You give up a little bit of median projection to get that extra correlation to beat 1 million people. Great. But in a 2-game slate, you're not fooling anybody. And you're not going to be able to, to make a game stack and say, boy, this is going to be sneaky. So you are going to have to come up with good plays. But you're going to try to have to come up with plays that have a little bit of upside above, what either their projections are or at least above what their ownership is going to project to show, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is Narrative Street, okay? And again, in a 2-game slate, I want to talk about Narrative Street just for a second. Again, we're trying to find something that might give you a little bit of an edge over projection models. And all I will say is this. I actually believe at this particular moment that both Paul George and Kawhi are going to play. I mean, this is, it's a 2-game slate. Mark Cuban is there. He's been waiting for this freaking game. He has probably the favorite to win the West coming to town. And he's got Kawhi coming and Paul George. And I actually think that they're both going to play. But it's possible, obviously, they don't. But the reason I mention it from a Narrative Street perspective is I hear a lot of talk about different guys on Dallas you could play in this game. Like I've seen projection systems that rate Dwight Powell a really, really good value. And he probably is at 4,000. And he also is being shown as being one of the more popular plays on the slate at 4,000, which makes sense if you want to get some of the studs in. But for me, I think this is just going to be one of those games where it's just going to be the Luka and Kristaps show, and they are just going to just be in as many minutes as humanly possible for them. And some of these other plays are actually going to end up being over-owned relative to their chances of performing. One guy you'll hear about a lot today is probably Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr. in the last game just came out of nowhere, and at 36, 38 minutes, they had him starting. He could start today as well, but with a guy with no peripherals and no upside, unless he just starts making all his shots, I just don't think this is that type of game where we're going to say, okay, Tim Hardaway, you lead us to the promised land against the Clippers. Okay, it's just not going to happen. I mean, obviously it could, but given the fact that he's not going to be that low owned either, I just don't think that that's the way you want to go for upside on the slate. But just to kind of look at the projections where I'm kind of, I don't want to say basing all this on, I just want to just look and see from a value perspective. Yeah, it looks like Luka and Kristaps Porzingis and actually Jokic are projecting as the 3 highest values. But I'm looking at this. I'm looking at Luka, and they're showing him as a 35 minutes as far as minutes projection. And again, if you want to look for upside in certain plays, upside above and beyond projections, there are only, in my opinion, two ways that you can do better than the projections. Number one is if you expect upside in usage. In other words, if you think that there's going to be more usage available than the projections are showing. And secondly, whether you can get upside in minutes, meaning if you think there's a way for them to get upside from the minutes they're projecting. So that's what I look at is after I see what these values are, what numbers are these values based on, and is there upside from that? So I look and I see they're projecting Luka and Kristaps both at 36, 35 minutes. The only upside there is from that is, from a minutes perspective, it's probably going to be kind of overtime risk, okay, overtime upside, which does exist. I mean, there is, 5%, 7% chance that given the spread, this could go to overtime. And that's actually not irrelevant. So I think there is a little bit of upside in Luka and in Porzingis, not really in the usage perspective, right? I mean, they're already been very, very efficient. If anything, I think might be some regression in there for at least Luka, but I can't project that. I think from a minutes perspective, there is a little bit of overtime upside from these two guys. So I think you could play these two guys. On the Clipper side, I honestly don't see, first of all, from a straight value perspective, nobody's projecting me that great a value here if they all play, right? If Kawhi and Paul George both play, I really don't see that big of an upside, that big of a raw projection or a baseline projection value for any of these three guys. That's not to say you can't play them. I mean, it's only a 2-game slate. You can play anybody, really, and these are all good players. But unless there's actual upside from these projections, I don't really see the need to prioritize them. And I'm looking again at the minutes projection. All right, well, Kawhi, they're projecting a 34 minutes. Paul George between 30, maybe about 33 minutes. And Lou Williams about 30 minutes. I guess if there is one guy that might have minutes upside, I would say it might be Lou Williams, maybe. So if there was a guy from this team I would want to play based on upside from the projections, I would say maybe Lou Williams. But he rates as the lowest value of all three of them. So it's going to be difficult. You'll hear a lot of talk about pivoting and going down to guys like Patrick Beverley. I guess it's possible, but he's showing as a negative value. And with a lot of other guys I could play, I don't think I'm going to do that. Again, I'm going to go with this idea that it's going to be studs versus studs in this game. And the one guy I would play on the Clippers if I wanted to would be Montrezl Harrell. And the reason why I bring him up, whether I play him or not, is this idea that I discuss quite frequently that two medians are not the same. Meaning, when you look at projections online, they're usually projecting what the median projection of that player is. So what that means is, let's say they run, 11. There'll be more than that. Let's say they run 11 simulations of 11 possible games. Whatever the sixth number is, you put the highest ones on one side, lower ones on the other side. Whichever the middle number is, that's the median, okay? But the way different players distribute their results makes them different types of players, right? So you could have two guys with the same median projection, but one guy gets there nice and smoothly, and another guy gets there with all kinds of wild swings. So which of those guys do you use? Well, as usual, it depends. If you want to increase variance, you need a real high variance player, you're going to want the type of guy that has those big wild swings. Where if you need a guy to smooth out the variance of your lineups, you're going to want the guy with the median that is achieved by more smoothing. The reason why I bring up Montrezl Harrell is they have a median projection of him, which is, I don't know, like 30 or something like that. But I know that game log watching is not usually the greatest way to play DFS, but just to show you, okay, you have this guy with a 59 and then a 33 and a 25 and then a 55 and then a 26, a 42 and a 19 and a 40 and a 33 and a 62, right? So this type of variance in results is going to produce a median that might be the same as some other guy, and I wish I had an example of that has just more average type results across this, across this plane of numbers. But you take a guy like Montrezl Harrell, if you're looking for a guy that has upside from his median, right, then I think this is a good way to go because his upside from his median is really, really high. The standard deviation from his median is really high. So in a GPP where you're looking to get that upside, you know, and you're willing to risk being wrong and just losing that whole lineup, I think this is probably a good way to kind of go, right? I'm going to put him in here just, you know, just to put a guy in. Let's just put him in, just so I don't forget. All right. So let's talk about the other game for a minute. All right, let's talk about the Washington-Denver game. This game really challenged me because it addresses an issue which I talk about literally every slate that I do these reviews whenever I talk to people about the way DFS works and the way information aggregation works, meaning when you listen to other people and try to make sense of what other people are saying and what other sites are saying and projection models are saying. You have to avoid double counting information, okay? Like when I look at this game at first, I look Denver-Washington game, I'm like, okay, these guys are probably going to project really well. And you know what? Washington just plays no defense. It's a huge pace-up game for Denver. So these Denver guys are just going to go off on these Washington guys. Now, you'll see what I did there. I said the same thing 3 different ways, right? I said, number 1, they're going to project well, which is the case. I said, number 2, it's a pace-up matchup. That's true, and that's why they're going to project well. And 3, I said Washington plays just no defense. And all those 3 things are saying the exact same thing, meaning that they're just coming to the same conclusion that Washington, these guys are, you know, Denver guys are good plays. That's why they're going to project well. But you don't want to overcount that information. So just because I see, you know, Jamal Murray at 7,400 and he projects just okay, actually, as a very, very small value, I don't necessarily want to just bump him higher because, quote unquote, Washington doesn't play defense, because that's already, remember random walk? That's already been baked into the projection, okay? So this game challenged me as far as that's concerned. The one guy, well, let's just go over, quote unquote, the plays, I guess. On the Washington side, I mean, honestly, there's Bradley Beal and Thomas Bryant. Those 2 guys are popping as the best values, and really not by that much. And I wouldn't say not by that much. They don't look to be that great values. But compared to these other guys, they're just looking to be the best values. Then you have this whole spread of Isaiah Thomas, Hachimura, Troy Brown, Bertans, Wagner, okay? So we have to figure out of all of these guys, okay, which of them are going to have the most upside from these projections, because all these guys project rather, you know, as the kids used to say, meh, right? They used to, they don't project to be that great. So what you're going to look for is someone that maybe their median has some room for upside, okay, or has more standard deviation than somebody else's median. So the 2 guys that I'm looking at on the Washington side that might fit that bill is, one guy is Moritz Wagner, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think that if you redid these projections and kind of overweighted like the trends of how minutes were going, rather than just taking what they think is a median projection, I think that there's actually room for upside. And they're only projecting him, sites I'm looking at are for about 20 minutes. I do think that considering he's a rookie and considering I could just see that they're just giving him more and more minutes, he's becoming more and more active. And I think the fact that he's becoming more and more active is not necessarily baked into those projections. And what that does do, him being more and more active, is going to, I think, lend the coach that upside to play him more minutes. And I feel as though Wagner at 19 minutes has a lot of upside from that. And if he especially has a good game, you know, he's one of those guys that, as I say, self-correlates. As he plays well, he's going to play more, right? It's not like a stud where he's going to play 36 minutes regardless. These guys that are active coming off the bench, they self-correlate. If they do well, they're going to play more. So Moritz Wagner is one guy that I look at. And I would rather have him than some, you know, maybe some Dwight Powell guy. But let's where are we going to put him just for the sake of argument? Let's put him in instead of Max Kleber. The other guy from the Washington side that I think likewise has pretty decent upside, maybe not as much as Wagner, but is Davis Bertans. The only reason I say he's not quite as good as far as upside goes as Wagner is I think his minutes projection is, I don't want to say fair, but he is projected for 28 minutes. So it's not like he's projected for 20 minutes. I don't know how much upside he has from 28 minutes. I don't know exactly what his ceiling minutes projection is going to be. But if this is a close game, closer than people think, he's probably going to be closing. He's a really good shooter, right? And they're going to want him in the game. So I think he is a guy that definitely has upside. I still actually prefer Wagner with respect to who has more upside to their minutes, right? So I would probably keep Wagner over Bertans, but that's not saying that you can't play them both, right? So let's put in, for example, Bertans instead of Barton, just for the hell of it. I do have kind of a strong opinion on the other side of the game. And again, I'm not just giving you plays, all right? You look, I'll tell you who the players are, right? Okay, so Nikola Jokic is a good value. Congratulations. The other starters in this game are probably okay value. Jamal Murray, like I said, Paul Millsap, Gary Harris. He's going to play 36 minutes. It's 4,200. Excuse me, 32 minutes, maybe upside of 34 minutes. He's 4,200, and everybody knows it, so everybody's going to play him, right? What do you know that no one else knows, right? What is not baked into the price? And if it's not baked into the price, it's certainly going to be baked into the ownership, right? So, and then there's Will Barton. Again, he's showing just kind of like an okay value. So not that you can't play all these guys or any of these guys, but, what upside is there from that? Well, I'm taking a look at it. They're basing these on, again, I can't really give a big usage bump from here because I presume that everybody knows that Washington plays no defense, and that's all been baked into these projections. So I do see that Jokic is only projected for 32 minutes, okay? And I guess the reason for that, one of them, is they are a 10-point favorite, so that they're baking in some amount of blowout risk in this. So if that's the case, if he's only projected for 32 minutes, then I do think there's actually upside from that projection, right? So I actually think that Jokic could actually be a pretty decent play. Right now, you say, well, tell me something I don't know, right? But I mean, it's important that you're able to think this way. So I do think that Jokic, even though he's going to be popular, maybe won't be the most popular player on the slate. And I do think he does some minutes upside from that in case Washington does keep that close. Now we have to talk about if Washington keeps it close, do we have to run back somebody from Washington in this build? Probably, or maybe. I would say probably. So you probably have to put in somebody like Bradley Beal in that kind of lineup. But I do think that Jokic has that possibility for minutes upside. The other guy who I think has significant minutes upside, which I think is going to be probably my key player to play today, is going to be Mason Plumlee. And the reason for that is kind of the opposite reason of why I think Jokic might have some minute upside. I mean, they're baking in that there's at least some degree of blowout risk or whatever, so they're only giving Jokic maybe 32 minutes. Well, they're showing Mason Plumlee at maybe, 16, 17 minutes? And I'm sorry, but first of all, I think that he has upside from that baseline, regardless of whether it's a blowout, right? Just because of the way he plays and the way Washington defends, I do think that he has some at least usage upside from that. I just don't think that at only 16 minutes, I mean, is that big of a deal. I do think there's minutes upside from there. I do think there's usage upside from there. But the most important thing is the minutes upside, okay? At 16 minutes, what if this game, first of all, what if this game does blow out? Which it could happen. If Mason Plumlee gets 25 minutes or 26 minutes at 3,800, he's going to smash, right? What if he doesn't get the 20? What if he doesn't get 24 minutes? What if he only gets the 16 minutes? Well, then he's kind of just okay. But that's the type of risk reward I'm willing to live with. I'm willing to say, okay, right now he's looking at projecting to be not such a great play, but that's based on a 16-minute projection. So if you can get that upside, that minutes upside to kick in, I mean, then you're in business. So what I would do is I would probably, for this slate, make two builds. I would make one build with Jokic as my center, and the other build I would have what's his name? The guy I just said Mason Plumlee. Okay. So what you can do, again, I don't need to build your lineups for you, right? But I think this is a way to go here. Like here, let's see what this lineup looks like for a second. This lineup has Luka and it has Porzingis. The only Clipper it has running back is Montrezl Harrell, who I said was kind of that median projection guy who could have upside just because of the way his results distribute, right? He doesn't necessarily have upside from his median, but just the way his results distribute, you might get that part of the median, right, that can win you a tournament, right? That could give you one of those outcomes that can win you a tournament. And he's not going to be that highly owned. Now, again, this is also presuming that both George and Kawhi play. And this one, leaves 1,000 on the table. I didn't really talk about Lou Williams. I'm sure he's a good play. The other thing you could do if you want to do this is you can go up to Jamal Murray if you're willing to make some concessions somewhere else. And you might be able to do some funny business like move Gary Harris to the shooting guard position and just kind of finagle around with some of the other plays we discussed, right? So, I mean, just for the hell of it, I'm going to just put this in. Leave 1,000 on the table, and let's just do that. But I think that's the way I would build today is I would make one lineup. I would try to use Bertans and Wagner, one or if not both of them in every lineup. I would use one lineup with Plumlee, one set of lineups with Plumlee, and one set of lineups with Jokic. And I would have no issues on this slate putting both Luka and Porzingis in the same lineup. I know that it's tough for two, I don't know, it's expensive, not that expensive, guys to hit ceilings, but I think in this particular type of game, especially on a two-game slate where the raw points are going to matter, I don't think it's that bad to put these guys in the same lineup. Now, what I probably will do is I probably will do some lineups where I have Luka and Porzingis, some with just Porzingis and some with just Luka, but I don't see a way to avoid playing at least one of them in every lineup. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause. Am I going to pause and do FanDuel? Yeah, I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to do FanDuel. Actually, I'm not going to pause because I don't know how to pause. So what we're going to do is I guess we're going to go right to FanDuel. How do I get FanDuel over here? All right, let's do it. Let's get FanDuel over here. And then I could review my last night, which was really close. We were really, really close to getting it done. For those of you that watched the video last night, yesterday, you knew we were really heavy on this Golden State stack, and we were smashing it and just couldn't get that overtime shot we needed. If we got that overtime shot, we would have won the single entry, which would have been awesome. All right, so in FanDuel, the concepts are the same. But I just wanted to do a quick check and see if there's anybody that really stands out as a different type of value on FanDuel as opposed to DraftKings. All I would say, just doing a quick look, is that nobody really stands out as much on FanDuel, where at DraftKings there are more standouts. So FanDuel, you could get away with being a little more spread out with some lesser-owned guys. But my concept of the games are kind of the same. Like the upside type guys are still going to be. I'm just looking at the projections real quick. I still think Moritz Wagner is going to have upside from his projection, and I still think that Bertan's going to have upside from his projection. Again, I still think Moritz Wagner is going to be better. Okay. Now on FanDuel, it's a little different because you have to play a center. And you have to play him at center. but and you'd have to choose between him and Thomas Bryant. And that could be actually a way to go. Like Thomas Bryant is going to be really, really popular. So if you can get away with this and you put in Moritz Wagner instead of Thomas Bryant, I mean, you could really be in business. Now, again, this is just the way the lineup happened to kind of pop out here. But let's see if we can do the same things. Let's see if we can also put in, see, now here's the problem, also not the problem. Here, what you can do is you have Plumlee, who you could also put in the center spot. So you have Plumlee and Jokic or Wagner. Now, on FanDuel, I mean, I didn't really look at ownership, but I find it very difficult to believe that people are that they're going to not play either Jokic or Bryant. I have to think those two guys are going to be insanely popular. And if you want to drop all the way to Wagner, I mean, that gets you a lot of flexibility elsewhere. I put Seth Curry in here just as a placeholder, whatever it is. But I think, again, not to give everything about plays away, because, again, just look up the plays. It's still the same. But I would consider, again, looking for these upside type guys, upside relative to their projections. And once again, back to Wagner and back to the other guys I mentioned. I guess that's all I want to do for today. And when we come back tomorrow, Bobby will be here. I know you guys are saying, thank God, Bobby will be back. And we'll be doing more in-depth stuff on the actual games. But I'm hoping that at least something that I said, philosophically at least, kind of kicked in. Now, again, none of this has to do with full portfolio. I was about to say portfolio destruction, which is going to be a very interesting, very interesting misstep. But none of this really applies to portfolio construction per se. It's more about picking good upside plays. Didn't really talk about how they work well with one another. That could be for a different time. But hopefully, at least you got something out of this.